So what we're going to do today is we're going to be assembling one of these IKEA hutches. It has like a area to hang up some clothes, and then it has some space for, you know, folded clothes or the little basket thing. Let's get started. Go ahead and get these unboxed and start the assembly. I'm going to start with number one. So I want your three main panels. These are the widest and longest panels that come with the kit. The edge, I mentioned earlier, these pieces have a lip on the back side of them. There's two of them do. These outside ones do. And you want those to be facing in toward this middle piece. So it's very important when you're putting this together to have your orientation right, so that you can follow along and know I'm putting this, where it needs to be. So making sure that these are lined up and laid out according to the proper orientation is an important step in making sure that you put this together correctly. For this panel, the leftmost panel, I've got three sets up the left hand side, three sets of two holes, two here, two there, and two up at the top. I have a mirror of that on the panel farthest to the right. So on the right panel, all the way on the right hand edge, all the way up, I have a mirror of those two. So two at the bottom, two in the middle, two at the top. And then for the middle one, I have the same thing, but only the rightmost side of that board. You've got two here, two in the middle, and two at the top. And those holes, those series of holes, are going to be the starting point for the assembly here. So let's get started. We've got these pieces here, which are the first pieces that we're going to be mounting, and we just need to screw those in. I'm going to use a screwdriver. If you've watched my assembly of the bookshelf, and I'll try to put a link to that maybe in the description or at the end of this video. I found that it was it can be a little tricky using a drill to insert some of these screws. So I tend to want to use just a screwdriver to do it so that I don't mess up, because this board, as sturdy as it can be at the end of the project, if you put the screw in wrong from the start, this stuff can just break apart almost without warning. And once you ruin the hole that you're screwing it into, you can't repair it. I mean, it's just done for. And you've got to do the best you can to try to shore it up using something else. I don't know what, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my screwdriver. Putting these in, we've got for your leftmost board, you're going to go over here on the leftmost side of that board, and there's a small arrow right in front of this screw, and you want that pointed to the left. and then you want your screws to go into the B opening. So the instructions can be, as you might expect, can be a little hard to read on these sometimes. It shows three on one. It shows basically the same thing, just mirrored, and you do 3 this way and 3 this way, or 6 this way. That's because 3 of them are on this panel facing to the left, going up this side, and then you flip it over and you've got 6 because you've got the middle panel and the right hand panel, each with 3 of these pointing the opposite direction. So it's essentially the same step, it's just mirrored. Started on this leftmost panel here. Just position them over the holes. Now I'm just going to center it to start with, but that could change. I may have to adjust this later. At this part of the process, I'm not sure what's going into this. I assume it's the hinge later on, but this may need to be adjusted for whatever is going into it down the road. So I'm just gonna kind of barely tighten it right now and get all of them in place, and then we may have to adjust it later to make sure. All right, next step, we're going to get our dowels going. Side, and we need 2 of these in the bottom. 2 of these in the bottom of this piece and 2 of these in the top. Again, this is our middle piece. It does not have a beveled edge on either side, and they go there. So when you look at the bottom of this, it actually has a set of holes here and a set of holes here. The dowels right now are going in the outermost set of holes. Let's tap it in. Tap it in. And then do the same on the top, the outermost holes. Since we're already working with dowels, we're going to go ahead and do our shelves as well. And these also have holes down either side, and you're going to put the dowels in same as the other. You're going to put them in the outermost hole there. And some of these dowels, the holes are large enough that you can just push them in by hand. Some of them would take some slight tapping with a hammer. You don't have to really hammer those in place. You just want them kind of snug in there, sunk in a decent amount. These are just going to kind of help hold those shelves in place. Main thing is you get it in straight, and you don't force it into a position that it doesn't want to go in. Now I'm putting together the 3-door version of this. I imagine the 2-door version of it will be very similar, but I am assembling the 3-door version of this part, this wardrobe. There are 3 shelves that we're doing this for as well. So each one of these shelves is going to have a total of 6 dowels. 3 down either side. And again, I'm not hitting hard, I'm just kind of tapping these into place. Very gently, don't want to overdo it. If I need to come back and hammer it in a little bit more once I start the assembly, I can always do that. Alright, next step. You want to take your middle piece here, and we're going to mount one of these shelves in the center of this piece, and it's going to mount on the side opposite of the hinge, or this bracket that we've just installed. So my bracket is on this side, on the bottom, down here, and I'm going to mount my shelf on this other side over here, away from the hinge. Important note is that the shelf has one edge, one of the short edges, so long edge here, short edges here. One of those edges is going to be finished. It's going to have the laminate piece on it. Same with this piece. The side with the brackets that we've just put in is also laminated. You want to make sure that all of your laminated edges are facing the same way, because obviously those are the ones that are going to be seen. So I've got my laminated edge down, so I make sure on my shelf the laminated edge is down, and then we simply slide it into these holes. The dowels that we just put in will go into the holes in this piece, laminated edge down. These two edges are flush, and then we're going to grab a couple of these larger screws here, and those will screw through this piece. There's two holes going down this side. These will screw into that piece through this, and the screwdriver will do me no good because these are this Allen wrench that comes with it will fit those screws. So get your Allen wrench out, and same thing with these as with the screws that we were using earlier. Just snug it up. You don't want to over tighten these. You can break through this board and ruin your whole shelf. So just snug it up till it's, you know, kind of tight, and you don't want to crank down on it because you can easily break this. So middle shelf is in. All right, so the next step after you get your shelf in is you're going to locate your ceiling and floor of the cabinet. Now these are going to be the same width basically as your main panels, but significantly shorter by a foot or so. Maybe by more than a foot. That's going to be these panels here. And what you're going to do with these is basically the same thing that you did with this center panel, which is put your dowels in the bottom and the top of these pieces. And again, just like with the other one, they go in the outermost hole. So there's a set of holes here, you know, one up and one down. I'm going to put it in the upper one because it's closest to the edge. And then the same thing here, there's two. And I'm going to put it in the bottom one because it's closer to that bottom edge down there. And I'll do the same thing on the other end. All right, your next step on these two panels that we've just put the dowels in, you've got these two holes here, kind of off to themselves. You've got, you know, two on each. So for these, you've got these little plastic bumpers, almost is what they kind of look like to me. It almost looks at first like they're threaded, but they're not actually threaded. It's just got ridges there that will kind of grip the wood. So you're not screwing these in, you're going to hammer these into place in these two holes. Now those are taking more force than any of the other parts have so far. You've really kind of got to drive those in there. All right, this next step can be a little confusing. You take, so one of these panels that you've just put the plastic pieces on, if you flip it over upside down, you'll see there's these two obvious holes here, and right at the edge is the smallest indention. Like it doesn't, it's not even wood. I mean, it doesn't even hardly break the laminate on the outside. There's just the smallest indention there. That's where your screw is going to go, and you only do this to one of these panels. So take a little time, inspect both of them, and again, this is the side that is opposite of the plastic pieces that we've just nailed in. And right on the back side, on the edge, is just the tiniest, it's very hard to see, the tiniest little bit of a divot that's been taken out of the laminate. You're going to have a little L bracket that's going to go in there. Face it toward the closest edge there, and you need one of the short screws. Those are nails, more nails. You have a long screw. That is not it. And here is short screw. So the short one is the one that you're going to use to put in this L bracket. And again, just make sure the vertical edge is closest to the side there. And I think I'm actually going to use the drill for this, since the hole is not fully bored out. I'll make it a little easier to put this in. Again, I know you're probably sick of hearing me say it, just snug it up. You don't want to screw this in too much and mess up that wood. All right, so again, orientation is important. We've got the L bracket that we just mounted here, and it is facing a finished edge here. My finished edge on my centerpiece here is currently on the floor. So I want to make sure this finished edge also goes to the floor, so that and how you end up is you end up with the L bracket close to the floor and your shelf sticking off to the left. And then the centerpiece here. So essentially this edge, when it's all said and done, will almost assuredly line up with the edge of that center shelf. So I turn this, I line up my dowels, and the holes provided. What I'm running into is that this piece, centerpiece, is not quite as wide as the base. So it's actually sitting up off the floor slightly, which just makes it a little difficult to keep the dowels holding it in place currently. But I've got it in, and I'm going to go ahead and put these screws in. Alright, the next step is to put the top, so the mirror of this piece on the other end. I mentioned earlier that these pieces also have this this lip. So the lip on this piece is on the bottom edge here. And it's the unfinished edge. The top one will be a mirror of that. So the lip will be on the top edge of that piece. And your plastic pieces that we hammered in earlier are going to face the inside of the unit. So again, we've got to line up the dowels first, get it in place, and then take your screws and screw them in. Alright, next step is go ahead and get these other panels in place. The shelving, before we put the outside cap on it. So again, make sure your finished edge is facing the same way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of get the bottom dowels kind of lined up. Then I'm going to take my shelves and get them in place. Got my panel started, and what I'm going to do is partially put my screws in, not tighten them all the way down, but just get it to where the head, the flat part of the screw there, is sticking out of the wood, just to give myself a little bit of play so that I can finish getting these middle shelves in place. As soon as those are all in, you want to take 4 of these other screws and tighten them up in these other shelves. So you've got 2 screws in this bottom panel, 2 screws in your middle shelf, and then 2 screws in the top panel. And that's going to hold these 2 middle shelves that only have dowels in them. It's going to hold everything together. You're kind of sandwiching those between everything. So that'll give you a nice secure shelf. 3 shelves along the length of this side. All right. We've got a couple of pieces here that we're going to be putting dowels in the end. We've got 2 holes in the end of each of these. I'll be putting dowels in each of those. Flip it over, and you do the other side. On the edge of these, you'll see on each one you have a set of 2 holes. That takes one of these little bumpers. Just kind of push that in. You can hammer it if you need to. These are little gliders just to help it slide across the floor a little bit easier. Little plastic pads, basically. Alright, so your first one will go outside of this L bracket that we put in. Make sure your pad is facing the bottom of the unit. Should be only one way that you can put it in there. And then next one is about maybe 2/3 of the way up. Push in there. And then you kind of got to hold that because you have to put the panel on the other side that's going to hold that up. And then we've got our final end piece over here that will need to line up with all of those dowels. You've got a total of 6 dowels down here at the bottom that need to line up with the holes in this panel here. So the best way I've found to do this is get the bottommost one first, kind of lean this panel back a little bit, as close to parallel as you can, and then you just start lining up these bottom dowels. You've got a dowel on the bottom of this piece and 2 dowels on that lower panel we just put in. Then you move up to these. You've got 2 dowels on this, 2 holes for those, and then you've got 1 more dowel at the top of this panel. And then you've got them all in. Then you can take your screws. You've only got 2 holes on the outside of this panel. And before we go to the top, I'm actually going to go ahead and screw in, find another one of these short screws, and use my drill. We're going to drill it through the L bracket into this bottom piece down here. It's going to hold that middle panel a little more snug down there, and then we're going to take 2 more of these screws and our Allen wrench, and we're going to the top of that panel to screw that in. So same as the bottom, we just line up those dowels, push together, and there's only 2 dowels that we have to work with on this end, so it's significantly easier. All right, so we've got our shell of this whole thing assembled and ready to go. The next step in this process is we're going to put our back paneling on. These are the thin pieces, maybe 1/4 inch pieces of paneling, and they will lay inside of the lip that's on the bottom piece and the side pieces and the top piece. So we'll get those laid in. There's a single width piece that goes over the shelves, and then there's one that folds out that will go over this more open spot in the wardrobe. I'm grabbing my single piece here, white side to the inside of the unit. Make sure it lines up with the side all the way around. Keep it nice and square. You'll probably go ahead and put both of these on before we start nailing, so that we make sure everything is nice and square before we put our first nail in. Make sure it's just inside that lip. And they give you a bunch of these little nails, and they also give you this little nail holder. It'll keep you from hitting your finger, but then it also positions the nail at the right distance from the edge, so that you don't end up splitting the wood when you're putting the nail in. So, although I'm not one to hit my finger, I do want to make sure that I have it the right distance from the edge. So put your nail in. There's a little groove there for the nail, the hole. Slide that on. Pull it off. Tap it right on in. So I'm gonna start working my way around. Do the corners probably first, and then come back and start nailing in along the rest of the edges. Final thing before you stand it up is you want to get these bumpers, same as you have on this middle one, on this outside, these outside pieces. You'll have 2 of them per edge, so 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. Alright, now we stand it up. Easy as that, right? We got these little brackets. This is what's going to hold the hang-up clothes. It's got a little peg on the bottom. It's got a hole in the top where you put another one of these small screws. There's an assortment of holes here at the top, so you can put it as low or as high as you want to. Just you got to make sure, of course, that the top hole is lined up with one of the other holes. So you put your peg in, and then you can use your screw to tighten it up. And then you just want to make sure on the other side that it's pick the same hole. And then the bar just basically sits down in that piece there. And that's where your hang-up clothes will go. Have the hinge. There's really only one way that you can put that in. Get the piece put in there, line up the holes. Again, you use those same small screws to tighten that up. Three hinges per side, so we'll go ahead and put the other two on the bottom. Right, once you've got all three of your hinges on, there's a kind of an eye shape to the hole, as a big end and a small end. That big end will actually sit right over the screw in the bracket that we mounted way back at the very beginning, and will essentially hold the door in place. And then it's just a matter of lining it up once you have that how you want it. Just tighten up that screw. I'm just going to start at the top and kind of work my way down. Now, in the instructions, you may notice that they tell you to mount the unit to the wall before you put the doors on. I'm not doing that in this case. I'm trying to kind of get through this. My daughters are trying to go to sleep right now. But that's because the doors add weight to the front of the unit. And if someone was to try to climb on it, whatever, it would make it easier for it to tip over. I'm going to go back and mount them to the wall after I build it, just to kind of get it out of the way tonight, and then come back tomorrow and actually mount it to the wall, so it's nice and safe for the girls. But I just wanted to point that out. In the instructions, it does say to do that first, and I'm not doing that intentionally myself, but I will go back and mount it to the wall afterwards. Alright, there's your finished unit. Last thing we're going to do is throw the handles on there. There you go. All finished.